Greetings, YouTube and fellow traditionalist Catholics. This is Sergio Becerra II, and welcome back to my channel. And today we're still going to be continuing our dark history of the popes. So in our last video, we finished off with Pope John the 12th, who is by far one of the many worst popes in church history. So if you remember in one of my other previous videos, before I talked about John the 12th, one pope in particular that I did bring up was Pope Benedict the Ninth. Now, there was only one small section of him that only gave small details of his reign. So I wasn't able to find any more information from the book that I was reading, A Dark History of the Popes by Brenda Ralph Lewis. So I have here another textbook that I have right here that covers every single pope in history from St. Peter all the way to anti-Pope Francis. And here it is, the popes. Every question answered from St. Peter to Pope Francis. The fascinating biographies of all 266 popes. Author's name, Rupert Matthews. So I found the information right here, and I do remember having this book this whole time. I thought I would have more information of Benedict the Ninth in the last one that covers the dark history of the popes. So we're going to use this book here that covers every single pope here. Let's see, let me find it. Here we go. Pope Benedict the Ninth. So this will be a special video that I'll do here for you, covering all three terms of Benedict's reign, and then also covering the histories of Pope Sylvester III, Benedict the Ninth's godfather, who became Pope Gregory the Sixth, and then with Pope Clement II, and then finally with Pope Damasus II. So I'm going to cover every single one of their histories because back and forth, Benedict the Ninth kept coming back to retake the chair of Peter, and then finally ending it with Pope Damasus II, which I will also cover. So this will be a special reading and a special video just for you. And what I like about this book, on every page on the very bottom, there's like a timeline here of different current events, if you can see. So yeah. So here we are. We're going to start up with Pope Benedict the Ninth, his first term as Pope from 1032 to 1044. Now, he is by far the last member of the counts of the family of Tusculum that had control of Rome. And his immediate predecessor, when before he got elected, was his own uncle, Pope John the 19th. In fact, he had two uncles that had succeeded to the papacy. That would be, of course, Benedict the 8th, and then John the 19th. Then finally with Benedict the 9th. Okay. So here we are, Pope Benedict the 9th. First term as the 145th Pope from 1032 to 1044. This is his first term on the chair before his first resignation. Like Pope Benedict VIII and John the 19th, Benedict came from the powerful Tusculan family who ruled the Papal States with an iron hand. The two previous popes had been brothers of Count Alberic III, but both died childless, so Alberic chose his own son, Theophylactic, to be the next pope. Okay, Benedict's real name is Theophylactic. Now, in Latin, that means guardian of God. But remember, upon being elected as pope, you also had to take up another name. And he took up the name Benedict, which is also Latin for blessed. So Theophylactic means guardian of God, Benedict meaning blessed. So his family thought by taking that name, it would be a good sign for him. Not exactly. So here we go. The youth was aged about 20 and had already been involved in a number of fights, seductions, and alleged rapes, as well as extended bouts of heavy drinking and alleged homosexual affairs. So Benedict, so from what I understand, what I've already read before, even before his time as Pope, and even during, as it says here, rapes, seductions, therefore debauchery in all means, and then of course heavy drinking, and of course the suspicion of being homosexual, which were allegations made up by enemies of his family. But other, but there are other things that Benedict did during his time within his first few years as pope. Theophylact had no real interest in the papacy and took the job on only because his father told him to do so. No details have survived of his election, which was organized and no doubt controlled by Count Alberic. His first recorded act as Pope Benedict IX was to hold a drunken party in the Lateran Palace, which in the Lateran Palace, I'm sorry, Pope Benedict IX was to hold a drunken party in the Lateran Palace, to which some notoriously immoral women were invited. Okay, now here's another thing we need to cover grounds here. Way before the invention of the conclave, which was 2 centuries later, during the papacy of Gregory X, the Christian community and the entire public of Rome could elect their next pope. So Rome was like even though ancient Rome at the time was a republic before it became an empire. Now the papacy somewhat at the time was like a republic, but the people themselves get to choose the next pope. But like any ordinary election, there would be bribery, buying votes, etc. And who they got to pick. Not just the Christian community, such as the just ordinary people of Rome, but the clergy too. They also got to pick their next pope. But after all, so by later on in the 11th century, things later changed when it comes to electing a new pope, which I will cover later on. Yeah, but another thing also to talk about is that Benedict was not even a real member of the clergy. No spiritual training as a priest whatsoever. Had no interest in the papacy, which which states here, which I've already looked up on online research as well. Benedict IX had no interest in bureaucracy or public service, nor public service as the Roman pontiff. He only cared about is the privileges of power. That was it, because he was above all, not just those within the church, but you had the whole world, all of Western civilization. Therefore, he had power over the monarchs. But since he was elected as Pope, sorry, I know I've been itchy. Since he was elected Pope at a very young age, I mean, like any young adult, like in their, like between the age of 18 throughout their 20s, the only thing they're good at is partying, and which we see here with Benedict's first few days as Pope. Okay, where was I? Okay, Benedict was soon confronted by one of the most unusual problem. Oh, I'm sorry. Benedict, sorry. Benedict was soon confronted by one of the most unusual problems ever to face a pope, when certain clerics began preaching that the end of the world was about to arrive. The fear of apocalypse affected not only the clerics, but also the peasants, who already faced famine due to severe weather. and the nobles who ruled them. There was a wave of penitential processions, religious devotion, and mass confessions of sin. In places, the clamor in places the sorry in places the clamor for salvation led to work in the fields being neglected, making only more certain the likely famine. Benedict was called upon to calm nerves, which he did by issuing exhortation, explanations and exhortation that, together with the onset of better weather, calmed nerves. The passing of Easter and the anniversary of the crucifixion without the earth being destroyed ended the panic. Now I've heard from other no I've from what I've heard I think by the beginning of the 11th century, kind of like what we saw back in 2000, that the world was coming to an end. But I think another similar thing occurred right at the beginning of the 11th century, thinking that the earth was going to end because we're not we're not really taking God seriously, and then other problems started to occur. So for to prevent any kind of destruction on the world, like the apocalypse, confessions, prayers, and processions, even given certain goods to the church in order to save the planet from any further destruction. For example, if a farmer gave away his cow to the local monastery on behalf of the church, but then once the beginning of the 11th century like had finally passed, like nothing else happened, the peasants would be like, "Can we get back our cow?" No, it's God's cow. You gave it to us. So I guess later on that during Benedict's time that there was other panic involving famine as well. People were starving, even though lands were not being taken care of, and people did start taking the church really serious by going to confession and attending to processions, and then Easter. I mean, well, Easter, well, through all the days of Lent. I mean, we're almost, well, today's Thursday. It's right now Passover, and then tomorrow's Good Friday, and then followed by Easter in the next few days. Let's see, we may. So 3 more days till Easter. Today's Passover. So Benedict had to calm the masses down, make sure you did everything what the church said, and then all things would go down, would calm down, which did happen later on. Benedict proved to be entirely orthodox in his religious policies, perhaps because he left the real work to his curia and astute in politics. Well, it looks like people did take Benedict's words seriously and took him as orthodox. Well, that that's not what I've read in other texts, knowing that how bad Benedict was. In 1037, the Holy Roman Emperor Conrad II deposed Archbishop Aribert of Milan, who had provoked a rebellion in northern Italy. Benedict did not meekly do as instructed, but insisted on investigating the matter first. Nearly a year passed before he announced he would excommunicate Aribert. In September 1044, a minor incident led to major rioting as mobs rampaged through Rome. The anger of the crowd turned against Benedict, accused of incompetence. I'm sorry. The anger of the crowd turned against Benedict, accused of incompetence and greed, as well as his established vices of drinking and debauchery. Well, like I said, like any young adult in their 20s, turn to drinking and debauchery, just partying like it's no tomorrow. caught by caught by surprise, and with no more wish to become a martyr than he had to become celibate, Benedict fled Rome. So he had like this uprising going on in 1044, which is the year that Benedict would resign his first time as pope, because Benedict had was just out of control, really didn't take his job seriously whatsoever. Now I'm going to read this paragraph that's highlighted in blue. A demon from hell, right here. Benedict's contemporary, Saint Peter Damian of Ravenna, wrote that he feasted on immorality, and Bishop Benno of Piacenza recorded him guilty of many vile adulteries and murders. The future Pope, the future Pope Victor III, who was in Rome at the time, wrote, "His rapes, murders, and other unspeakable acts, his life as a pope, so vile, so foul, so execrable that I shudder to think of it." Later historians were even less restrained, with Ferdinand Gregor, Gregorvius, Gregorvius writing, "A demon from hell, in the disguise of a priest, occupied the chair of Peter." So Benedict had a couple of critics during this time. One of them, a well-known figure, that would be Saint Peter Damian, because Benedict was referred as a demon from hell. And then, of course, another critic that would be one of Benedict's future successors. That would be Pope Victor III, who would later be beatified as a blessed. So, blessed Pope Victor III. And of course, Benedict had other accusations besides just drinking and debauchery. Of course, incest. Oh wait, did I say incest? No. Well, he had rapes, murders, other accusations against him. Even though his enemies of the enemies of his family also accused him of horrific sexual crimes, which I did mention. That starts with an R word. Starts with the R word. The R word. Well, you know what I mean. I gotta be careful with such words I gotta say here, even though it's written here. So yeah, you had someone else that also referred to him as a demon from hell. And I mean, there's a well-known quote by Saint Peter Damian, um, that kind of fits. That also does talk about, the way he's criticized sodomites, even though Benedict was also accused of being homosexual himself, saying, "Why do you damnable sodomites always try to reach the most ecclesiastical height within the church?" But yeah, Pope Victor III was also, like I said, as another critic who was in Rome at the time, wrote. So this is his own. So I guess there's like a book out by Pope Victor III during his time. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure there are texts that do describe Benedict's horrific reign, his rapes, murders, and other unspeakable acts. So debauchery, rape, murders, all that. So Benedict soon later resigns, which we will see next. So now we move on with Pope Sylvester III, the 146th Pope, whose reign was only short. Started his reign in 1045. The man who emerged as Pope from the riots of 1044 was the saint was the saintly and entirely unambiguous Bishop John of Sabina. His surname of Crescenti Avotani Ata. I'm sorry, I'm trying to pronounce this word. It starts with an O. Ottaviani shows that he was a member of the powerful Crescenti family who had controlled the papacy for decades until 1012. So I think mentioned the Crescenti family in the other book that I was reading to all of you, that the two had control of the church. I don't remember which popes exactly um, that were part of that family. Maybe John the 10th or Leo the 6th. I don't remember. So here we go. We're gonna now read into the short papacy of Pope Sylvester III. When riots broke out in Rome in 1044, and the mob turned against Benedict IX of the Tusculan family, the rival Cristani family saw its chance. The Crescenti had its power base in Sabini Hills. Oh, the Crescenti had its power base in the Sabini Hills north of Rome, and between 965 and 1012 had ruled Rome and the Papal States. They had been badly depleted in the civil war that engulfed Rome and led to the death of Sergius II, but had not been destroyed entirely. Well, they had gone along with the rule of the Tusculan family. They had neither forgotten their ambition nor their previous status, forming rapid alliances with other local noble families. The Crescenti called a synod of Roman clergy that declared Benedict IX to be deposed. It was some months before order could be restored to Rome and deals done between the various factions, but finally, in January 1045, an election was held to produce a new pope. John had his cathedral seat in Fara Sabina, a small town in the Sabine Hills near Rieti that, in 1006, had been forfeited by the addition of an immensely strong castle. His ambition seems to have been limited to the bishopric of Sabina and to leading a quiet, holy life in his diocese. He seems to have been chosen partly for his saintly reputation and partly because he was the only cleric acceptable to the various factions involved in in, in deposing Benedict IX. So, from other sources that I have read, even watching documentaries, there were some documentaries that I did watch on TV. This was about a few years back, which I think a lot of it got the information wrong, saying that Benedict was forced out of Rome, and the only because of his destruction and the way how he was leading the papacy. So it seems because what they're saying that the cardinals would bribe him in order for him to survive, in order for the church to survive, because paying off someone, I think, is an act of um I forget the word, but it went against the church canons. Oh my god, I can't even remember. I'm having a hard time trying to figure out the word. I think no, I'm sorry. Well, in other words, it went against church canons about bribing a pope in order to get him to step down, which was not the case. Benedict was thrown out completely, not to be heard of. Sacrilegious, I think that's the word. I'm sorry. I'm trying to remember some words. Yeah, I think it was sacrilegious. I think that's the word. not blasphemy. No, yeah, I think it was sacrilegious. Yeah, but did it go against canon law when paying someone off to step down as the pontiff? So here we go. John adopted the name of Sylvester III, apparently in tribute to Sylvester I. He moved into the Lateran Palace and began clearing up the mess left by Benedict. No sooner was Sylvester in his new home, however, then word came from Trastarve, downriver on the Tiber from Rome. Benedict IX was back, protected by the armed might of the Tusculum and in no mood to compromise. Well, Benedict did come from a powerful family, and he had um, an army of his own from his own family that would march into Rome, get back the papal throne. So this is where we see Benedict coming back for a second term as pope. But then, as soon as I get done right here with Sylvester, this is where I read into Benedict the Ninth's second term because he comes back as pope, but doesn't last long, which we'll later get into. Let me see. Where was I? Okay. In February, Benedict announced that he had excommunicated Sylvester. So we now see Benedict excommunicating Sylvester. On March 10th, having first conducted a diplomatic drive to detach allies from the Crescenti, the Tusculum family struck. Benedict dressed himself in his full papal regula and led the Tusculum army on a march on Rome. So he comes back all in his vestments, which says here, in full papal regalia, and led the Tusculum army on a march on Rome. Papal regalia, so he was all dressed up as he was before. Probably had his papal tiara on or whatever he was wearing. And of course, marches back in and takes back St. Peter's completely. The gates of the city were thrown open, and Benedict arrived in triumph, as Sylvester fled back to Farah Sabina and resumed his duties as Bishop of Sabina. So Sylvester III is now gone, and he's gone back to being an what is it, a bishop of Sabina, which he which he which he was which is where he was before. So now you got one pope now being exiled, excommunicated by Benedict, but still claims to be the real pope, even though he's hiding out where he was before. And then now we see Benedict coming back. So let's continue. Although driven from power in Rome, the Crescenti retained their lands and castles in the Sabine Hills. Their military strength meant that Benedict's revenge could not touch Sylvester. Sorry, I was trying to read something here that I may have missed. In December 1046, the Synod of Sutri, see page 128, which will be in the next page after I read Benedict the Ninth's second term, declared that Sylvester should become a monk and be unfrocked as a priest, which would have made him ineligible to continue as Bishop of Sabina. But the sentence was never enforced. It is thought that his successors as Pope were content to leave Sylvester to his diocese, since he was quite obviously not a threat, having not wanted to become Pope in the first place. So Sylvester the Third didn't really want to become Pope, but he was given the chance. So, like it says here, the Synod of Sutri or Council of Sutri, which was not a real ecumenical council by the church, because this was enacted by the Holy Roman Emperor Henry III of Germany, because the whole point of the Council of Sutri, or the Synod of Sutri, if you will, it all had to do with Benedict coming back and forth, taking the Vatican completely. So, as it says here, he would not be able to be the Bishop of Sutri, I mean the Bishop of Sabina, but would still be a priest on Fracht, which it says here. Yeah, well, they declare that Sylvester should become a monk and be unfrocked as a priest. Unfrocked. Um, un- yeah, so they pushed for Sylvester III to become a monk, but still remain a priest, but would not keep his bishopric, which would have made him ineligible to continue being bishop. But the sentence was never enforced. Okay, so it looks like he still kept his bishopric after being no longer the pope, even though it was never enforced. Okay, so now I know this is going to be a long video, so we're going to still go into it. I don't care if it takes me forever. Okay, now Pope Benedict the Ninth, second term, now as the 147th Pope, going back to now it starts here in the year 1045, which doesn't last long either. In March 1045, the young Pope Benedict the Ninth did his duty by his family by leading their army into Rome and ousting Sylvester III. In doing so, he introduced one of the more contentious episodes in the papal apostolic succession. The events of 1045 left a rather unholy mess. So here we see Benedict coming back a second time as Pope. Excuse me, I need some coffee. My throat's getting dry. So here we go. Benedict the Ninth, second term as Pope, which does not last long. Here we go. Having reigned the papacy, Benedict the Ninth then focused all his energy on ridding himself of the title. All he was concerned about in the spring of 1045 was that he had fallen in love and wanted to get married. As Pope, he was vowed to chastity. Well, chastity and celibacy didn't come in place until later on with Gregory VII, which one of Benedict's later future successors as Pope, making marriage impossible. He was consequently keen to stop being Pope as soon as he could. For several weeks after his return to Rome, Benedict willingly did the business of his family, signing decrees and other acts as instructed. At some point in April, however, Benedict went to see his godfather, John Grayton, who was priest of the Basilica of St. John by the Latin Gate. Benedict asked Benedict asked if there was a legal way in which he could abdicate. John was a reformist clergyman and, although closely allied to the Tusculan faction, had never approved of, of the disclosure. Oh, sorry. Had never approved of the dissolute Benedict being Pope. Sorry, let me read this again. Had never approved of the dissolute Benedict being Pope. Okay. So it looks like Benedict's godfather, who was a priest at the time, who we later see um, buying the papacy and later succeeding him as Pope, never approved his godson to being Pope in the first place. He advised that Benedict could stand down either by becoming a monk or by signing a formal document renouncing his position as pope. Benedict had no wish to become a monk, so he opted for the document. Okay, so this is where we see Benedict resign a second time because Benedict's second term only lasts a month, falling in love. Now, from other sources that I have researched on, it says that he married a cousin of his. So either he married some other random woman or someone within his family, which of course is kind of insane that he would marry someone close to him. I think it was a first or second cousin that he married. But well, let's see. So Benedict takes the document, signs it in order for him to resign and then finally get married instead of becoming a monk, which we might see later on towards the end of his third term. Benedict then raised a difficulty. Benedict then raised a difficulty. His only source of income was the papacy. In his hope for status as a married nobleman, Benedict would need money. What followed next is unclear, probably because those involved chose to keep the details hidden. The most reasonable reading of available evidence is that Benedict wanted to keep hold of certain papal lands to give him an income once he had stood down. This was a controversial theological and political issue. One reason why the clinic reforms were firmly in favor of clerical celibacy was that married bishops and priests had used their positions to create lands and wealth belonging to the church to their children. For the Pope now to give a lead in precisely this sin was out of the question. Instead, Benedict was paid a huge sum in cash to stand down. Those paying the money wanted something in return, and that something was control of the papacy. Here we go. Benedict steps down for a second time in order to get married. He sells off the papacy to his godfather, and he becomes Pope Gregory VI. Now I'm going to read this blue highlighted paragraph right here. Two-time Pope. It has generally been held that a man continues to be Pope until either his death or his abdication, since no earthly power can judge the Holy See. So, strictly speaking, Sylvester's election was invalid, and he was technically a usurper or anti-pope. However, Sylvester was of undeniably saintly temperament, and it appeared that everyone had acted in good faith because it was only after Sylvester III was elected that Benedict sent a message to Rome saying that he did not accept his own deposition and that he considered himself to still be pope. For this reason, the official view of the Catholic Church is that Benedict ceased to be pope when he was deposed, that Sylvester became pope when he was elected and then ceased to be pope when he was in turn deposed, at which point Benedict became pope again. Benedict IX is thus unique in papal records for having legitimately become pope twice. Well, since Sylvester III did everything by the book, well, even though not a saint, but did things saintly wise. So even though he was no longer pope, even though deposed, so he was still declared as a real legitimate pope, not an anti-pope. Even after Benedict's uh, three-term reign, people would question whether Benedict the Ninth would be labeled as an anti-pope, but no, he was still later considered as a legitimate pope because his on and off resignations was just out of the ordinary. So now here we go with the 148th Pope, Pope Gregory VI, from 1045 to 1046. So here we go again. Excuse me. Okay, here we go. Pope Gregory VI, the godfather to Pope Benedict IX. John Grayton, who ruled as Gregory VI, was the key man in the negotiations to get Benedict to stand down. He had been a priest in the Basilica of St. John by the Latin Gate and a papal insider. He was known to and apparently trusted by the Curia, and he was related to the wealthy Pierloni banking family. He was a well-known proponent of church reform, a cause supported by the new King of Germany, Henry III. So the Curia and the Cardinals, they seem to like Gregory VI more than Benedict, who is just an absolute mess. And of course, Gregory was a reformer, which history does state, again, from other sources that I have read, including here. So they rather keep Gregory VI in place instead of having his godson being a total disaster, making things more bad for the church. It seemed that Benedict and I just really seemed to be a lazy man, by all means. When he arrived in the Lateran Palace, Gregory found that the papacy was in a mess. Oh, sorry, let me read again. When he arrived in the Lateran Palace, Gregory found that the papacy was in a mess. Despite the huge income from the papal states, lands owned in other countries, and assorted bequests and legacies, the papacy was effectively bankrupt. Gregory was likely to find among the many clerks in the Curia a young man named Hildebrand of Bonazzi, a blacksmith's son from Salvanna in Tuscany. Hildebrand had shown remark I'm sorry, let me read this again. Hildebrand had shown remarkable intelligence at a young age, and so had been educated by the local nobility. By 1045, he was a senior financial clerk in the Curia. Together, Gregory and Hildebrand set about reforming the papal finances and repairing the years of plundering. So the papacy was broke. So you got Gregory VI and the son of a blacksmith within the Curia getting starting to get money back into the coffers of the church once again. One thing I forgot to mention that when Benedict IX sold the papacy to his godfather, Gregory VI was paid in 1,000 pounds of gold and silver. When I say pounds, I don't mean British currency. I mean pounds as in weight of gold and silver. Paid a lot in order for him to take the papacy, which did happen. So this is another simple act within the church, and which of course I have mentioned. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I did on the act of simony, because Benedict IX would later be held accountable for that same charge once Henry III started marching into Rome for the Council of Sutri. Gregory also made a start on supporting the reforms based at Cluny and other monasteries. This won him instant acclaim in all quarters and seemed to set the papacy on a course that would take it away from the control of local nobles. By the by the late summer, Gregory was being talked about as the best pope for decades. King Henry III of Germany, who of course is the Holy Roman Emperor, chose this moment to come to Italy to be crowned as Holy Roman Emperor. So, okay, so Henry III at the time is the King of Germany. Gregory VI makes him the Holy Roman Emperor. And of course, all the talk, within the curia, within the clergy, of course, and now with the German monarchy, Gregory VI was the way better pope and did the new reforms and know how to get things on track, etc. So Gregory VI is by far the best pope ever in history, which I would have to believe so because if this godson couldn't even do that himself, even though it was a disaster, then leave everything to Gregory. I'm sorry. Got up early this morning trying to get everything ready. As soon as he was over the Alps, Henry began hearing about the murky arrangement by which Benedict had been bribed to abdicate in the financial mess of the papacy. At Pavia, Henry summoned a synod which, among other things, condemned the sin of simony. Gregory hurried north to welcome Henry as the two men got on well. Nevertheless, Henry summoned a second synod to meet on December 20th at Sutri. He summoned not only Gregory VI but also Sylvester III and Benedict IX. Benedict did not show up. Sylvester did arrive and was promptly told that he was no longer pope. Gregory was then accused of having paid to become pope. Yeah, because again, as I mentioned, Benedict had paid his godfather to become pope once Benedict left the second time. So the Holy Roman Emperor gets rid of both Sylvester and Gregory. In vain did they in vain did he explain that he had merely contributed to the fund to purchase Benedict to stand aside, but that his actual election had been fair. He too was deposed. Henry sent Gregory north to Cologne in comfortable comfortable house arrest until his death. So Gregory VI dies in Germany, which Rich says here in this top corner note when he was born, when his papacy had started, and when he died. The date of his death is unknown, but was born in Rome, died in Cologne in 1047. So he dies within a year being uh, after being deposed by Henry. And here's a little quick note right here. Sutri, some 50 miles from Rome, provided the venue for Henry III's second synod in December 1045. So here we have a small Italian town. Here's a picture of it. You can see right here where my finger's at. This is just a small little village in the town of Sutri, which is 50 miles of Rome. Okay, so Gregory VI is gone. Sylvester III is also gone. So they're both deposed. Benedict never showed up, so therefore making um, uh, Benedict the Ninth's election also over as well, since he never showed up, as I had mentioned. Now, this is where we see Henry III installing one of the German cardinals as Pope, Clement II. So here we are, the 149th Pope from 1046 to 1047. Now, Clement II's papacy doesn't last long. So, born in Hamburg, Germany, date unknown, and dies in Pesaro, Italy, on October 9th, 1047. So Clement II's reign doesn't last long either. So here we go with Clement II. Bishop Swigger of Bamberg was elected unanimously and took the name Clement II. He was enthroned on Christmas Day and then crowned Henry III as Holy Roman Emperor. Okay, my mistake. I apologize by all means. I thought Gregory the Sixth would make Henry III Holy Roman Emperor. I mean, there was some information that was never mentioned with Clement II about him crowning Henry III as the new emperor. So right here, I've done a lot of research and whatever I can find, and never was there anything about Clement II crowning Henry III. Okay, he was enthroned on Christmas Day and then crowned Henry III as Holy Roman Emperor and appointed him Patriarch of Rome, the title used by the Crescenti and Tusculans to control the city. So just like, well, here's the thing about Henry III. He's also a descendant to Charlemagne, and both men were crowned on Christmas Day. Let's see. Charlemagne was crowned on Christmas Day of 800 AD, and here we have Henry III also on Christmas Day of 1046. Here we go. The many years of determination by successive popes to assert the primacy of the Holy See of Rome over all others in Christendom meant that the Pope could appoint or depose bishops, abbots, archbishops, and others at will. His rulings in matters of doctrine were highly regarded and were usually followed. These powers were not only over ecclesiastical matters, but also impinged on secular concerns right across Europe. But the middle of the 11th century, oh, I'm sorry, by the middle of the 11th century, the position of the Pope had become simply too important to be left to the Romans. Who was Pope and how to conduct himself was a matter for all of Western Christendom. As the most important and powerful secular ruler in Europe, the Holy Roman Emperor had more reason than most to be concerned about who was Pope and how they behaved. It was for this reason that Henry III had held the Synod of Sutri in December 1046, which deposed Gregory VI, Sylvester III, and Benedict IX and replaced them with the man who was a friend and confidant and shared his enthusiasm for reform of the church. His enthusiasm for reform of the Christian church. Pope and Emperor then set out to impose their authority on southern Italy. With general success, though, Benevento refused to submit. Back in Rome by the end of February, Clement began the process of reform. He ordered that all bishops had to be invested. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me read that again. He ordered that all bishops had to be investigated in case they had been guilty of simony. So, so now things had to take a new step, making sure that no one within the clergy, like the bishops, weren't involved in any act of simony, just like what we saw with Benedict IX and Gregory VI. So, with Clement II and now with Clement II and Henry III, they became a good team, good partners in the end. Then Then followed a string of letters and instructions to all corners of Europe, encouraging the reform movement. He was assiduous in taking advice from Abbot Odilo of Cluny on various matters. Despite this move toward reform, Clement found time for a bit of old-fashioned favoritism and issued a bull confirming all sorts of privileges on the bishopric of Bamberg. On October 1st, Clement was visiting the abbey of Tommaso near Pesaro when he fell ill and later died. His body was embalmed and taken north to be buried in Bamberg Cathedral. So he dies in Pesaro, Italy, but is later buried in Bamberg Cathedral, which is in Germany. So Clement was from Germany, and then of course dies in Italy and is returned back to Germany. So he's buried back in his homeland. So we're gonna read this blue highlighted right here. Growing papal power. Bishoprics and abbeys were sometimes large-scale landholders. Those estates owed taxes Those estates owed taxes to the local secular rulers, and very often owed feudal dues as well. The most important feudal duty of any large landholder was to go to war as leader of the levies from the estates. Not many bishops wanted to go to war, though some did, and they usually hired somebody to lead on their behalf. But having command of a sizable body of armed men meant that a bishop or abbot was also a key political player in his home state. Secular rulers had the power to get rid of any troublesome noble and replace him with someone more reliable. But the increasing power of the papacy meant that a ruler was no longer able to oust a churchman he did not like. So let me read this last part here. But the increasing power of the papacy meant that a ruler was no longer able to oust a churchman he did not like. So there's growing papal power. How well, it's kind of a bit complicated when it comes to certain powers, war, and all that between the church and the secular section within Europe. Now, Clement II is now dead. And here we go again. Finally, Pope Benedict IX, third term, now regarded as the 150th Pope from 1047 to 1048. Here we go again. And this is where the cleric finally says enough is enough. And then we see Henry III coming back into Germany, get rid of Benedict completely. After the council or synod of Sutri deposed all three popes, Benedict, Sylvester, and Gregory. And as for Clement II, died peacefully while handling reforms within the church. After being paid a large sum of money to stand down as pope in May 1045, Benedict IX went to live near the rural town of Frascati, then as now famous for its wine. Nestling in the Alpine Hills, Frascati was in the heart of the lands of the Tusculan family, of which he was a member. So remember, in Benedict's second term as Pope, he wanted to get married. He signed a document that he would step down again, paid his godfather to be the next Pope, but his marriage to whoever it was, which some have said to be a relative of his, turned him down. Now he's back again, especially after Henry III, who at the time was King of Germany. Which I must apologize, misspoke. I thought that Gregory would be the one to crown him. It's Clement II. And I apologize once again because I've done so much to do some research on the papacy and its history with a lot of various popes. Not much I found concerning Gregory VI and Clement II having to crown Henry III as the emperor. I apologize. I'm doing my best for all of you. In fact, this is going to be like the longest video I've ever done that I've ever done for you all. So here we go. Here it is. Benedict IX, third term. In Frascati, Benedict settled down to the married life he had craved, while his godfather became Pope Gregory VI with the support of the Tusculan clan. When Henry III of Germany marched across the Alps and into Italy to be crowned Holy Roman Emperor, Benedict stayed at Rome reasoning this was a matter for Gregory to deal with. When Henry summoned a synod at Sutri and demanded Benedict attend, the ex-pope again wisely stayed at home, being wary of the consequences. He thus avoided being imprisoned, as were Gregory and Sylvester. The installation of a new pope, Clement II, also saw Benedict stay in Frascati, now hiding behind the troops of his uncle, Count Alberic III of Tusculum. But when Clement had but when Clement died suddenly in October 1047, it was time for Benedict to make a move. It seems unlikely that he would willingly have given up the wedded bliss for which he had abandoned the papacy only 2 years earlier. Much more likely in the fact that Count Alberic was behind the move. Whatever the cause, Benedict was greeted with wild enthusiasm when he rode into Rome on November 8th, 1047. The Romans had not enjoyed either being told who to elect by an outsider or the experience of being ruled by a German. They were they were therefore keen to get a pope who was once again one of them. The, I'm sorry. They were therefore keen. Sorry again. They were therefore keen to get a pope who was once again one of them. The clergy and people of Rome flocked to the Lateran to hail Benedict as pope. Though whether this event counts as a formal election is unclear. In any case, Benedict was now firmly back in power. As far as I know, that even though it says Benedict was married, living peacefully, but other sources that I've read that whoever he wanted to marry, like I said, whether it was a relative or someone else, didn't go well. So here we have Benedict now back. They didn't. They were fine with Gregory. They were fine with Gregory in the first place. Now the Romans did not like having to be commanded by a German pope. They did not feel comfortable with, even though Clement proved to be successful when ruling the church alongside with Henry III. But now they were happy to have Benedict back a third time. It could not last. Emperor Henry sent orders to his representative in Italy, Margrave Boniface III of Tuscany, that Benedict had to be ousted. Boniface was at first reluctant. Where it says Boniface III, I'm not talking about a pope um, by the name of Boniface, even though there's already been a number of popes named Boniface. But this is a Margrave. I don't know what a Margrave is. I'm pretty sure it's a noble title within Italy. But it says here Margrave Boniface III of Tuscany. So this is a nobleman that's connected with the Holy Roman Empire. Okay, so now here we see Benedict back as Pope. Now the Holy Roman Emperor now has to march back into Italy to deal with Benedict. Okay, here we have Boniface III of Tuscany now declared that Benedict the Ninth Benedict the Ninth now needed to be ousted from the papacy. I'm sorry for stumbling. That Benedict had to be ousted. Boniface was at first reluctant, as he was a friend and ally of Count Alberic. Moreover, had some sympathy with the view that the Bishop of Rome should be a Roman. After further orders arrived, Boniface finally marched into Rome and told Benedict that he had to retire to Frascati. This Benedict did, ignoring a demand from the next pope, Damasus II, that he should go to Rome to stand trial. He likewise ignored the excommunication that Leo IX imposed on him in 1049, and then lifted in 10. I'm sorry again. Let me read this again. I'm a little tired. I apologize. He likewise ignored the excommunication that Leo IX imposed on him in 1049 and then lifted in 1055. His subsequent fate is unknown, but he was buried in Grotta Ferrata and is so presumed to have died there and was certainly dead by the time Pope Stephen the Ninth was elected in 10, 1040 was elected in 1050. I'm sorry. Let me read this again. Subsequent fate is unknown, but he was buried in Grotta Ferrata and is so presumed to have died there and was certainly dead by the time Pope Stephen the Ninth was elected in 1057. Okay, the end of Pope Benedict the Ninth. Benedict is now gone. He has been put on trial for all the crimes he's been to have committed. It is said that he retired to a monastery in Grotta Ferrara. Now, if you saw in the last video where I did talk a little bit of a mention of Benedict the Ninth, showed a picture of the monastery which it is said that he had lived the rest of his life as a monk in that monastery until he died. Now, I'm going to read this highlighted paragraph right here. Apostolic succession. The primacy of the Bishop of Rome is based on the doctrine of apostolic succession. The most important bishoprics are those that were founded by an apostolic of Christ. Rome, St. Peter; Constantinople, St. Andrew; Alexandria, St. Mark; Antioch, St. Peter; Jerusalem, St. James the Just. I'm having a hard time trying to pronounce his name. Ek Mizet Et Ek Miadzin. I can't even pronounce his name, sorry. St. Bartholomew and Jude. Per Allah, St. Thomas, Tawado, St. Philip, New Justinia, St. Paul, and Kiev, St. Andrew. Rome has long claimed precedence over the others. The colorful career of Benedict IX threatened to disrupt the succession, so papal historians decided that he was legitimately enthroned as pope on 3 separate occasions, keeping the apostolic succession of Rome intact. So now Benedict's out of the way. The Holy Roman Emperor has now brought in a new pope, also from Germany, right here, Damasus II. Here we go. Date unknown, also from Germany, if I can pronounce this, Pidinau, Germany. I don't know if I got that right. And he died in Palestrina, Italy, in 1048. So Damascus' reign didn't last long. So here we are, the 151st Pope that only lasted in 1048. Bishop Papa of Brixen, as Damascus was. I'm sorry, let me read this again. Bishop Papa of Brixen, as Damascus was when elected, was probably a younger son of a Bavarian noble family. As Bishop of Brixen in the Tyrol since 1040, Papa built up a reputation as a man of formidable intelligence and learning, though being rather touchy about his honor. Okay, once I get done with Damascus II, this is where I explained changes when in the election, because I did mention in the beginning that the people of Rome got to elect their own next pope every single time, until things later changed almost a decade later. So here we go. Bishop Papa was a key advisor to King Henry III of Germany, traveling with him to Italy in 1046 when Henry was crowned Holy Roman Emperor. He played a leading role in the Synod of Sutri and was present in Rome for the enthronement of Clement II. When word arrived in Germany that Clement had died, Henry III exercised his rights as patrician of Rome and nominated a single candidate to the Roman clergy for election. So Henry III had a role as patrician with rights to who got to be the next candidate, next possible candidate who would take the throne, who would be the best, and of course another German pope would take the throne. And here we have Damasus II. Okay, sorry. I just had to read this. So remember where I left off. After seeking and ignoring the advice of Bishop Wazo of Liege, the leading bishop in the Holy Roman Empire, Henry asked Papa if he would be pope. Papa agreed and set off with a squad of soldiers and Henry's letter of nomination. Papa had reached Tuscany when he learned that the former Pope Benedict IX had married into Rome. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me not married. Marched. Let me read this again. I deeply apologize. Papa had reached Tuscany when he learned that the former Pope Benedict IX had marched into Rome and was back in control of the Lateran Palace. Margrave Boniface III of Tuscany advised Papa to give up and go home, being in league with Benedict's uncle Count Alberic III of Tusculum. Papa refused and appealed to Emperor Henry, who wrote to Boniface, informing him that if he did not march on Rome, then an imperial army would come over the Alps to sort things out. Boniface took the none too gentle hint that the situation in Rome would not be the only thing to be dealt with by the emperor. He mustered his men for war and took Papa to Rome. Count Albert chose to back down, and Benedict retired once again to his comfortable home in Frascati. When the troops of Boniface in the city, the clergy of Rome dutifully elected Papa on July 17th, who thus became yet another German to be elected pope. On instruction from the emperor, Papa took the name of Damasus II, perhaps to honor Damasus I, who had encouraged the veneration of martyrs and done much to codify canon law. I think Bishop Papa, uh, I believe, made the best move by taking that name as Damasus II because Saint Damasus I did codify both canon law and on the grounds of when it came to the veneration of martyrs. And of course, Damasus became a good popular pope, even though, again, we see another German pope in position of the church, even though the Romans did not like to have another foreign person to be pope. The first act of Damasus seems to have been to try to get to grips with the appalling state of the papal finances and to understand the febrile state of politics, both within the Curia and among the nobles of the Papal States. He was hindered in both by a blistering heat wave that struck Rome in later July. Damasus moved along with as much of the papal court as would make the journey to Palestrina in the Pennines, where the air was cooler. Among those who made the move was Gerhard Brazudas, a member of the financial sector within the Curia. Brazudas was a Brazudas was a known supporter of Benedict IX and a friend of Hildebrand uneasy, who had moved to Germany with Gregory VI, when Damasus suddenly fell sick with a fever and died. Suspicious eyes fell on Brozutus, who promptly fled. So Pope Damasus II's reign didn't last long. So at the end it says he fell ill and with a fever. Suspicious eyes fell on whoever this Brozutus, who promptly fled. So possibly foul play happened with Damasus II when while trying to avoid a nasty heat wave somewhere else. So the papal court had to move somewhere to avoid further heat in Strina, somewhere in Italy. So there you have it. This is like the longest I ever done in this video, and I apologize for stumbling and misinformed words within the text itself. Again, I got things mixed up with Henry III's coronation and who and which pope would crown him. So I was wrong. I thought Gregory VI was, but Clement II became the man who crowned Henry III as the emperor. Again, I do as much online research and then try to bring as much as I can in textbook form. So I apologize deeply. So I might still use this book to continue my series on the dark history of the popes, which popes that were known to be really bad. So Benedict proved to be more bad than his other relatives that had succeeded him within his family, like John the 12th. Benedict proved to be a lot more worse. And I would say, in my opinion, between Benedict the Ninth and Alexander the Sixth, that they both tied for first place as Pope. So Benedict the Ninth, the last of the Tusculan popes, is now done away with. Spent the rest of his life in a monastery. Knowing that he had stories to tell, well, not tell, but he kept to himself as Pope. I'm pretty sure, well, yeah, he kept to himself and didn't say nothing to anyone, telling his life story, what he did in the papacy, because some of the stuff he did before becoming Pope were gruesome, and even during. Now, I want to get to the part where, when it comes to elections, because the word conclave, which means in Latin with a key, conclave didn't come into use until later on the 13th century. So, years after Benedict IX's reign, later on in 1049, Pope Nicholas II initiated a papal bull called In Nomine Domini, Latin for In the Name of the Lord, making the cardinals the only sole electors of the new pope. So the Christian community in Rome that once for a long time had the ability and the right to elect who would be the next pope, along with the rest of the Christian clergy. But because of, like I said, with a lot of um, people buying votes and bribery and all that, so it came to become. So it now was initiated by Nicholas II as the new Roman Rite, that only the cardinals that the cardinals would be the only people that would elect a new pope. The cardinals only, so that was it. And the way they held their elections, this is like centuries before Sixtus IV built the Sistine Chapel, in which we see the different colored smoke. That there was a chosen pope and not a new pope that didn't get the 2/3 vote. White smoke meaning a new pope has been elected. Black smoke means that there has been no winner so far. No one has been chosen. Didn't get the right amount. Didn't get the amount of votes that were needed. 2/3. So yeah, back then, somewhat like a republic, even though Rome at the time in ancient times was a republic, to elect like their own leaders, but during the church's days, Rome was somewhat like a Christian republic where the papists where they get to choose the next Roman pontiff to lead the church. But that all changed under Nicholas II in in 1059 because of everything that had happened um, within the last few centuries. Who got to be the next pope? And then, of course, when it comes to resignations, we see Benedict the Ninth on and off 3 times, taking the papacy and then resigning. Well, his third and final time, he was kicked out. And then later on in 1294, we see the resignation of Pope Saint Celestine V, whose reign didn't last long. That went from August to December of 1294, and then later succeeded by Boniface VIII, who I might get into later because he's another pope that was also known to be bad. So I'm going to continue using this book right here as part of my series of bad popes. But I might go back to the other book because I might use that for when I get into the Borgia dynasty that had control of the papacy with Pope Alexander VI. And speaking of resignations, not only Benedict Celestine will be among the many other popes that have resigned, but by later on in the early 1400s, we see Gregory the 12th as the last pope to resign during the time of the Western Schism, which was a split in the church where you had multiple popes in control of the church. Not Benedict, Gregory the 12th was not a bad pope, but not amongst the many bad ones, but did his best to be the true legitimate pope when he had 3 different claimants, which of course is true that Gregory the 12th was a true pope, even though he had 2 other claimants that believed to be when in fact they were not. They were later regarded as anti-popes. And then finally, 600 years later, we see again with Benedict the 16th in 2013. So this is like the longest video I did, and having to read and explain a lot and the history of these dark popes. So I apologize once again for getting things mixed up, even stumbling my words. I just want to bring good content to all of you that enjoy learning history here, especially if you're a man of faith and I love learning about the church. Okay. So tell me what you think in the comments below. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell beside it, and tell me what you think. Pope Benedict the Ninth, 3 times as Pope, twice resigned, but deposed a 3rd time. Couple of successors, and finally ousted with Damasus II. All right, that this clears it up. So honestly, I don't know why I find Benedict's reign to be the most interesting, even though how bad he was. I don't know why I'm so drawn into it. The fact that Europe was still in the Dark Ages and didn't get itself pulled out by the time of the First Crusade. I don't know why. I mean, Benedict was so bad. I don't know why I'm so drawn and interested with him. I don't know why. There's a lot to explain, and of course he's among the many that were bad popes, especially those in his family like Sergius III and John the 12th. Because as I explained, from Sergius III all the way to John the 12th, that the papacy had entered a dark period where you had the mistress of Sergius III that had control of the papacy. And then you had other not successful, other popes that had succeeded Sergius III that were either good or bad, but just under the control of bad women that were just so obsessed with having power and who to install on the throne. Okay, that tears it up. Thank you for this long video. I'm going to take a break for the meantime because it's almost Easter. I'm sorry. So I will actually upload this video on Easter Sunday. So stay tuned for more bad pope history. Dark history of the dark popes. Okay. Take care now. Bye.